We'll get ourselves started. Welcome everybody to the show. We're turning the tables a little bit today. So everybody will know that Russell has spent a lifetime in reporting and journalism, asking the questions. And this time, no pressure on Richie and I, but it's us who need to ask the sort of semi-intelligent questions to try and even match a fraction of what Russell has achieved. So a little bit nervous today, Russell, but I'm sure you'll be kind on us. So, but no, I mean, not to understate it. It's fabulous to have Russell on because Russell is sort of the epitome of the marketing industry. He's editor-in-chief in Marketing Week and the Festival of Marketing, which means he's the lead of the UK's most prominent marketing title and event. He's also done many other things as well. And he's also a podcaster. He spent 12 years at Marketing Week, but always been in journalism as head. And he's had a couple of pretty key accolades. In 2017, he won the British Society of Magazine Editors New Editor of the Year Award and also the Brand of the Year Award in 2017. And I have to say, Russell has very, very generously supported the School of Marketing and indeed the Sprintathon recently. So he's, I think, somebody with a very kind heart who sees the bigger picture. And so what I did, just actually, Russell, you wouldn't have known this. I asked a couple of people what they think about you in preparation for this interview. So I asked Suki, who obviously you'll know very well. And Suki said, Russell has a forensic love of marketing, a desire to bring the magic and logic of the industry together and a passion to call out the brilliant people in it. And then I also asked Richard Robinson, and he said, Russell is the voice of the marketing industry. He sets the tone and pace of what we think of as marketing and stands for something higher than any one brand, campaign or strategy that might temporarily be in the spotlight. He's also got a big bushy beard, underneath which is a person who cares deeply about the people who work in the industry and the customers we serve every day of every week. So Russell, you're a very humble, well-liked professional in the industry. And so it's a great pleasure to have you on. And I'm sure our guests are going to love having you on. Thank you, Russell.
It's a great pleasure to be here. And thank you, everybody, the hearty and doughty souls that joined us this morning. I'm tearing up at that introduction. That's remarkable. And thank you to Suki and Richard for such kind words.
So, Russell, just to echo some of that sentiment, I've got to say that, one of my highlights of being a marketer and kicking off the School of Marketing was getting to know you and your team, and then the support that you guys gave us certainly throughout this journey that we are currently on is something that's definitely noteworthy as well, and really, really appreciated. And I think it just speaks wonders, just about the ethos of both yourself, your team, and as well as Marketing Week and what you guys are really all about. Really trying to highlight some of the great things that are happening across the industry and individuals within it. So thank you for your part to play in that.
Well, supporting the School of Marketing, sorry to interrupt, is about the easiest decision that I think I ever had as editor of Marketing Week, because what you're doing is both absolutely necessary and incredibly worthwhile. So I accept your thanks, but it's thanks to you that the School of Marketing exists and is thriving.
Awesome. But look, this is where the bromance ends.
Okay? I know. Come on.
I'm going to get you some hard-hitting questions and get this really kicked off. Okay, let's kick into this, Russell. So, tell me, of course, we were just talking about the plethora of meetings and trauma and figuring out how you rebalance yourself in this new sort of way in the world. How are you coping with it, Russell?
How am I rebalancing? Well, we were just talking before we went live, as it were, about readjusting to working life. It's remarkable to think how far the pendulum has swung from what we just did, which is essentially go to the office every day, to what we had to do by necessity. And now returning, it just throws up all sorts of challenges, actually being in the office and trying to define and understand what it means to be with people and what the value of that actually is. Because we've all gotten used, our entire week has been determined by where we work, and it's full of Zoom calls, it's full of constant check-ins, which are all very valuable, in large part necessary, but not entirely. But to kind of build in all those other wonderful things, which is, meeting people as a journalist, as an editor. It's the lifeblood of what I do, is building relationships with people, finding out what the issues and challenges are, and that's best done in person. Also, the effectiveness of what we do as a brand is better served by workshops and brainstorms, etc., and doing that in person. But at the same time, there's this sense that if you're doing that, then you're perhaps not as productive as you've learned to be over the last 2 years. Anyway, anybody got any advice on how you transition back to hybrid working? I don't have the answers. So if anybody else does, please give us a shout.
Put some stuff in the chat, guys. Here we go. Help Russell out.
So we're all trying to make sense of it all. You mentioned you did Hackney Half Marathon last weekend. Congratulations on that. I've got no idea if you've run one or hundreds, but is running part of how you make sense of the madness of the world?
I suppose so. Actually, no, running. Listen, I'm about the least qualified person to give you the lowdown on the virtues and values of running. A lot of the time when I'm running, I'm just concentrating on, well, getting through and getting home. I'm not, I'm a man in his late 40s. I'm not particularly sprightly, shall we say. But it is one of those things that clears the mind. It does empty to a degree, and perhaps gives you a greater sense of clarity over any challenges or issues, or whether or not you're going to make this for dinner or not. So it does help, actually. I mean, one of the things that I have, I suppose, suffered from or did suffer from during lockdown, particularly those early days, was anxiousness, anxiety. I never realized I was as anxious a person as I proved to be. I mean, I can sort of smile about it a little bit now, but at the time, the lengths I would go to just to avoid people, I became a little bit scared of people. I'm sure lots of people were in the same scenario, but to kind of link that to running did allow perhaps to relieve some of that anxiety, and does relieve some of that stress.
Yeah, thanks. Just to say, Russell, I don't know if you've read it already, but I'm a bit of a runner, but again, no great shakes. But there's a book called Born to Run, which you may have come across, which talks about our evolutionary biology and why we are literally born to run. But also, there's sort of the Zen side of it all. But appreciate you talking openly about anxiety, because I think it's true. We've all been through a lot of a roller coaster. But back to you, Richie.
Hey, no, not at all. I'm just picking up on what Keith says. So getting through and getting home is a good metaphor for all challenges. There we go. Russell, what was your journey into journalism?
My journey into journalism. It was a late entry into journalism. I didn't actually become a journalist until my early 30s. I suppose my journey began when I was, I suppose, in my teens in terms of journalism. Journalism, when you're asked, what do you want to do when you grow up? My answer was I wanted to be a journalist. And that was born from an obsession with magazines when I was younger. I brought props. Can I just show you some of them? It's magazines like this.
Hey.
That's a 1985 issue of Smash Hits, and then latterly NME with the Stone Roses on the front cover there from 1989. Now, I was obsessed by the writers in those, as well as the artists that they were featuring, but the writing and the style and this sense of, that journalists could get to the heart of the matter, etc. So I did want to become a journalist, but then, late teens happened. I had a little bit too good a time, I think, perhaps when I was doing my A-levels. I kind of drifted through the majority of my 20s. I didn't become a journalist, is what I'm telling you. I did all sorts of things that I wouldn't even garland by calling them a career. But then, having moved to London and been here a couple of years, I decided one day, you know what, I'm going to do that thing that I always said that I wanted to do when I was younger, and that's be a journalist. So I packed in whatever I was doing work-wise, went back to college, did a course, offered myself up to every local newspaper for work experience, worked as hard as I think I probably ever have by doing a course in my early 30s, and also, as I say, doing a lot of free work, and then became a journalist. So it was a late career choice, but it basically satisfied what I said I wanted to do and what fired me up when I was younger, but just never got around to doing it.
Lovely story, and it's a great representation of how many people fall into their jobs, not least in the marketing industry. That for many is of course a happy accident. So Russell, it's very many times before lockdown. Oh, by the way, you've absolutely nailed it in terms of the best props that any guest has ever bought.
Yeah. Oh, I have more. I have hundreds of these things.
Okay, that was enough, but it was great whilst it lasted. But no, I mean, when you and I have been at industry events, I'm a bit of a managed introvert, truth be known, and a bit shy, and I don't really thrive on a room of people I don't know. I love a room of people that I do know, but not a room of people I don't. And quite often we've just been chewing the fat, sat at the back quietly. And so it was interesting you say that your lifeblood is the relationships that you built. So I'm interested to know about, are you introvert, extrovert? How do you deal with the fact that you have to front up to some big egos, some big names, some big people? How does that conundrum work?
Oh, goodness. Am I an introvert or an extrovert? I suppose it depends. I mean, personally, I think we all want to just sort of be left alone on occasion. And just certainly as you perhaps get older, you become, I wouldn't say I'm a misanthrope, but certainly, I like my own time and that of my, the company of my family. But I mean, professionally, it's something that I had to learn, really. It doesn't really come naturally to anybody, I don't think. I mean, apart from the supremely confident or very drunk, maybe, I don't know. But, I mean, I always say this to new reporters, people who come onto my team, that it isn't a natural state of affairs. Is entering a room and going up to people that you don't know. Of course, there's an anxiety and nervousness around doing it, but you have to do it for some of the reasons I mentioned earlier. It is the lifeblood of what you do. So I guess it's learned behavior. It's not something that I'm not an innately confident person. I mean, my partner, Jane, I don't know why I'm pointing at her. She's in the other room. But she, it's when she's heard me doing these things, she's kind of gobsmacked, because that's not the person that she knows. And it's, she hears me doing a festival marketing session at home or a podcast or whatever. So it's learned behavior, but it's absolutely necessary, as I say. I guess you just dish yourself down and do it. But I mean, confidence comes from just doing something and then doing it reasonably well, getting told that you're doing it reasonably well, people enjoying what you're doing.
Russell, I want to pick up on something that you sort of just alluded to there, and sort of reflecting on a talk that we did with Seth Godin a few months ago now. And he talked about the fact that people had this mantra, particularly in marketing, that bring your authentic self to work and bring your whole self to work. And he was actually quite damning of that concept, saying that it's just not possible, right? All of us have our little sides that we need to kind of bear and bring at different points in a different context that we're in at work and probably at home as well. I just want to get your reflections on that, particularly when you said that, Jane kind of sees you as a different man when you're on the professional stage, as it were. Do you feel you can be yourself when in the context of doing these events and industry, and when you're out and about talking to marketers?
I think I probably agree with Seth Godin there a little bit. I've never really understood. I'm not dissing people who talk about bringing your whole self to work, but frankly, if I did, with all my foibles and failings and occasional grumpiness when I finish work, I would be a nightmare to work with. So actually, I think I should leave a large dollop of myself at home or in another room in this house. So I'm not sure, really. I mean, I see you obviously have to embrace people's individual idiosyncrasies and traits and respect what they can bring to the table as individuals at work. And all of that is absolutely necessary. But in terms of, I guess I do have a different persona. I hope generally I'm a nice person and the best of me is reflected at home as well as it is at work. But yeah, there is I'm not acting. This is not a performance. This is me that you're talking to. But there is a work me, and then there's a home me, and I think that's fine.
Thank you for sharing that, by the way, Russell.
Yeah, I think that's a great nuance, that it's not a performance, but of course there are subtleties, and everyone has the expression, allow everyone to be the best versions of themselves at work. But I think we all have our rough edges, and that wouldn't be helpful to bring them all through at all times. I'm just interested about you really got going in journalism in your 30s. And so I am interested to know a little bit more about your 20s, and maybe some of the things you learned and that have stood you in good stead for everything since.
I'm not sure I learned a great deal. I mean, when I left, I think to use that word journey, I feel like I'm a reality TV show contestant when I say that. But I think if there's a trait, it's about getting around to doing things quite late. When I left, I did A-levels in the late 80s, early 90s, and perhaps had too good a time going to for those perhaps over 40 might remember that there was an explosion in club culture. Let's not go too deep into what that meant, but it meant quite a lot of late nights and quite a lot of good fun that was had. So I didn't really do very well in my A-levels, which meant that I didn't even consider going to university then. It just wasn't a thing, perhaps born from the fact that nobody else in my family had ever been to university. Therefore, there wasn't a precedent set. So I didn't go. And then I went to work in a supermarket because I was full-time, because I was working there part-time. I was dairy manager. There you go. That was what I did. And then I went to university about 3 years after I did my A-levels, again, having realized maybe it's about time that I grew up, did that. And then, as I say, didn't really have a plan. I didn't have a plan of what it was I wanted to do. I mean, some of that is just born from apathy. I'm Generation X. Anybody who's read Douglas Coupland growing up in the 90s, there was apathy everywhere. So it was just a tale of, it wasn't even false starts or active choices. It was just a little bit of, okay, I'll do that next. And then, as I say, perhaps it was, I grew up in Leeds, by the way, moved down to London, sort of Dick Whittington style, to make my fortune. That wasn't the case, by the way. I also drifted in London for a couple of years, but then just suddenly woke up. It was almost a Damascene moment, thinking, you know what, I'm going to take control of what it is that I do and do that thing, like I said, that I wanted to do. And I referenced earlier. That's it. So there isn't, journey is more drifting than journey.
Well, I love that. And by the way, maybe in your memoirs it's dairy manager to editor-in-chief. There's something.
Yeah. But the lessons I could tell you.
Advise Russell on headlines.
No, that's a good idea. That's true enough. Yeah.
My journey from the dairy aisle in Safeway. Remember Safeways?
Well, yeah, of course I do. Absolutely. In the town that I moved to in the rural Scotland, there was Safeway was the highlight of the town. Trust me, spent many an hour there walking down those aisles. It was the only thing to do, really, more than anything. But, we have something else in common, I guess, Russell, because I was a bit of a pivoter in my 30s as well, and kind of got on this track that I'm on now in my 30s too. So kind of really trying to give up one thing and move to something completely different. So a little bit of, a bit of that I can kind of relate to in that sense of one day waking up and feeling a bit of a moment of got to do things that I really want to do and enjoy.
Yeah. If I could impart any advice, and I'm absolutely not the right person to impart career advice to anybody, but it is just, sometimes all of that drifting, all of that indecision is ultimately kind of worth it, because you realize that you don't want to go back to that, because that's no fun. You don't have a sense of purpose or momentum until you make an active decision. And that's what I ultimately did, and that set me on a better journey, shall we say, to use that word.
Sure. But it's just a bit of a follow-up, really. I mean, I'm sure when you were going down, sitting there in the cool light of day, trying to think about that moment in time, I'm going to follow my dream and go into journalism, and then you went in marketing. I mean, clearly, how did that then happen, right? Like journalism, I get, it feels like to me working for the New York or Financial Times seems like an obvious gig, but then marketing, how did that happen?
Oh man, there's going to be a pattern here, isn't there? Because the way I'm going about to listen, if I if I'd have had my choice, and it had still been going or an actual thing, I would have probably gone and worked for Smash Hits or maybe even NME. But at New York Times, it's not like I could have decided I was going to go work for the New York Times, Richie. I have some skills, but I'm never going to be able to say confidently that I have enough about me as a journalist to go work for the New York Times. But bless you for saying it. But I've mentioned sort of drifting into things a couple of times, and I'm afraid that is the case with Marketing Week as well. Not quite, perhaps, but listen, I started my paid journalism career as in the noughties, and then, as everybody watching will remember, there was a financial crash in 2008, 2009, and the world spun out of control, and lots of people were made redundant, including myself. So I was working for a title at Centaur, which publishes Marketing Week, called mad.co.uk. Some people might remember it. It was an early online only marketing, advertising, and design brand. Anyway, I was made redundant from that. That went and was folded. So I needed a job, and I applied for a job at Marketing Week, got given the job at Marketing Week, but decided that I didn't want that job at Marketing Week. I'm not quite sure why. So I went off to work for a travel magazine called Travel Trade Gazette, then was invited back to Centaur to work again for mad.co.uk because it had been resurrected as an aggregator. Then about 3 months after, the powers that be decided that that was no longer a good idea. So I was made redundant again, or that position was made redundant. Marketing Week was still there, still a shining light, a flagship brand of Centaur. It needed people. So I applied. And I thought to myself, I did have a few offers. So it was a decision of sorts. Marketing, I suppose, is one of those things that my mum might recognize as a thing. So I decided that Marketing Week was the right way to go. But again, it was one of those, I hope I've just conveyed there, that it wasn't necessarily Marketing Week was the brand that I wanted to work at. It became the brand that I wanted to be part of and be an active part of and ultimately leading. But I'm not going to pretend it was the pinnacle, the thing that I was aiming for. Sorry, that's a really long answer to a pretty straightforward question.
But it feels like it was a weaving course, but it felt like there was a sort of gravitation.
Oh yeah.
Or destiny.
If I was giving an inspiring keynote on career management, I would probably call it zigzag. But
yeah,
it wasn't.
I'm sorry. But I would have asked a different question. Richie said, good choice not to go to the New York Times and go into marketing. I mean, good choice, good decision.
Yes.
But where else would you want to be? So let's talk a bit about marketing, because honestly, Russell, nobody has a better purview of the people, the brands, the dynamics than you. And so I recently I've heard two very different opinions. One is marketing's knackered, it's low regard and low respect in the boardroom. We're not keeping up with data and tech and AI and getting left behind, coloring in function, blah, blah, blah. And then I found myself yesterday saying, never been a better time. Marketing's getting involved in strategic conversations like culture and diversity and inclusion and becoming the engine of growth post-pandemic. And in many cases is becoming the CEO's right-hand person. Never been a better time. So what's the reality from what you see about where is marketing at?
Oh, if I can sit a little bit on the fence, I think the answer is yes, or both things are a little bit right. I think the one thing that has pervaded my time at Marketing Week is exactly as you described at the beginning, Mark, is this sense that it's a sense of foreboding. It's a sense of, people staring at their neighbors, saying marketing's impact and influence is just no longer what it actually was. And I think that to a degree, in large part, is actually true. I think one of the biggest issues in marketing right now is trust. I don't mean trust in the way trust from a consumer perspective, although that's an issue. It's trust that people like CFOs and CEOs have in marketing. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, and it isn't the case with everybody, but I've seen enough reports, I've spoken to enough people to say that, or to conclude that there isn't the same kind of level of trust in what a marketer can do, and that's being eroded over a large over those 10 years. So I think to a degree that's absolutely true. I mean, there's loads of different reasons for it. Again, I get this from reports, but I also get it from just observing and analyzing in myself. I think the way that marketing success is communicated is an issue, in terms of people looking at what ultimately might be meaningless marketing metrics as opposed to marketing's contribution to business outcomes. So I think there is a responsibility of marketers to be better. I think, my colleague Mark Ritson talks a lot about the prominence of tactics over strategy, and everything that's happened in my 12 years now in Marketing Week as sort of pointed towards that. There's loads of ways and loads of new ways to execute. There's loads of new tactical toys, and I think there's been a greater focus on that than strategy, and that again has eroded confidence and also the ability or the sense of what marketing is in the boardroom, and the sense of what marketers are have the potential to be and do. So I think there's all sorts of contributing factors, but it does come down to trust. Now, to sort of give some kind of fillip, it's early morning. I think you're right. I think the thing is, marketers, I think, need confidence. They need to address some of those issues, but they need to have confidence, because the power to transform, particularly, right now, when nobody had any sense, 2 years ago, 18 months ago, when nobody really had a sense of precedence and a barometer and any blooming clue what was actually going on, marketing was really well placed, both to be attuned to customer sentiment, but also to lead the recovery. I mean, there's no function that, is responsible for behavior change. It has to be across macroeconomic factors, is able to discover in a way that marketing can, and the skills that marketers have around curiosity and empathy. So it is a moment in time here, but I think marketers perhaps need to realize that and have the confidence to know what they're capable of, because otherwise all of those other factors are gonna, I've just sort of meant that marketing is defined. I mean, not everywhere, I have to stress, not everywhere. There's plenty of really great examples of people that are leading in their organizations, but there's also plenty of other examples where other people are defining the narrative of what marketing is, and whether or not it be executors of their strategy, colouring in, etc. So I think to a degree, they need to be better at metrics, and they need to be better at defining what marketing is, but also just have confidence in what they can do and the value that they offer. And this is a moment, but it'll only be realized if they get some of those kind of fundamentals around metrics and communicating success in a more effective way. So I could talk about this stuff forever, but
it's a super relevant point of view, to be honest with you, Russell, and I do agree wholeheartedly that it is a real moment in time, and we do need to face up to the some of the cynicism and some of that pushback that we get, and confidence and is going to be key to that. Confidence, skills, deliverables, proving the worth of what we do. As you talk about metrics, is absolutely key. On a bit of a related note, Richard Brown asks a great question here. So do you think it's good for marketing that we now have these oracles like Ritson, Sharp, Gary V, Les Burnett, Bob Hoffman, etc., etc.? Do you think that's a good thing for us, that we have got our own set of influencers?
Yeah. I'm not necessarily with all of the examples that were given there, but let me start on comfortable ground. I mean, Mark is obviously something I know very well. Mark, in many ways, is the embodiment of a lot of what we try to do at Marketing Week. I mean, we are a magazine that is ultimately there to help people become more influential and more impactful. And I guess we do that in two ways. We celebrate success and we analyze what good looks like, and we also critically analyze bad practice and what's going wrong. Now, Mark is generally associated with the latter, but actually, if people look at his work in the round, is also very much about the former as well. So obviously, Mark, I would point to as somebody who can actually help with that ultimate objective of Marketing Week, but what should be the ultimate objective of all marketers, which is to gain greater influence in their organization, which in itself will deliver greater impact. So Mark, absolutely, as an influencer, is a good thing, and people should look to him. But I would say that, wouldn't I? But I mean, as for the other people, of course, I mean, people like Les and Byron Sharp are, they're delivering evidence. I mean, people can choose to ignore that evidence, but they're delivering evidence of what works and why, and how, therefore, to be more effective. So people should look at those, whether or not they look at them as oracles. That's elevating them to a higher degree, but as help, because they're doing the work that enables people to look and find out what works and what doesn't. So you should absolutely look at people like that. I'm not going to get drawn into a conversation about Gary Vaynerchuk.
Oh, I was waiting
That was the whole question. Yeah.
Oh, listen, I don't know Gary Vaynerchuk. A lot of my opinion on Gary Vaynerchuk is sort of delivered by others. I mean, everybody watching will probably be aware of what Mark said about him. I do remember, though. Sorry, I said I wasn't going to get drawn, but I never heard of Gary Vaynerchuk, but I heard him speak at a conference, goodness, ages ago. I think I was just reporting then, and he came on and he was, I'm not going to swear because it's early, but he was all bluster. This is that, blah, blah, blah. And he was so confident, talking about confident earlier on, that I was scribbling down notes thinking, this guy is great. I then went back to transcribe what he said, and I could not find a news line. I'm going to leave it at that.
Yeah. There you go. We can read between those lines all the way there, Russell. Thank you. So you mentioned Mark, and I think Mark, he's still a practitioner. He still consults. He's still involved. He still loves the craft, and so I think he talks with substance and experience. But he also is fun. He must be fun to work with. And so on the point of fun, do you think marketing is, through the years that you've been watching over it, more fun or less fun to be in as a profession?
Goodness. Again, I suppose as an outside looking in, I mean, I'm kind of, as I think I probably illustrate, I'm not a practitioner, but I suppose it is more fun, although that has to be qualified, I think. There's not necessarily within my lifetime, but I think the influence of some of the great technological advancements and innovations have come to fruition in marketing during my time. And I suppose I'm looking at things like the iPhone, Facebook, Instagram, those shiny tools of execution that have really come to the fore. And that provides all sorts of opportunities to reach and engage. So there is more at the disposal of marketers. Of course, it has to be overseen by good strategic sense, but there is more opportunity to reach and engage. Whether or not that's fun, I don't know. It depends how you get your kicks, I suppose, but there is a lot more going on. Now, fun or as an industry, it is absolutely, one thing I don't want to spend, or at least I don't want to dwell on, is problems in marketing, because marketing is just a career, a profession where you can achieve so much. There's very few positions, I suspect, in any organization where you have so many fingers, so much potential, so much ability potentially to transform an organization. And that should never, I don't know whether or not it's more fun or more possible now, but it's certainly something that people should remember always.
Russell, we've talked pretty much about sort of almost half your role at Centaur, because clearly you head up Marketing Week, but also the Festival of Marketing. So for those who are the uninitiated, it is pretty much like the Oscars of the marketing industry that happens pretty annually, and it's an amazing marketing get-together event over a couple of days where it really is the who's who that comes together to share insight, knowledge, and I'm sure be recognized. But clearly that hasn't happened in a face-to-face way over the last couple of years. Now, I want to get your take. What's the future of in-person events?
Oh, goodness. I think there is definitely a future. Absolutely. Because there is various things. I mean, I only took on the Festival of Marketing just after the pandemic. So I've only realized festival in digital form. So I think the nuts and bolts of how to put on a good event aren't particularly different from a content perspective, but the delivery of it is obviously massively different. So there is absolutely a future. I think there are various things that we've all realized, and I'm sure you two have experienced this as well, that you cannot do or replicate in person. I suppose to some degree it calls back to what we were talking about earlier about working in the office. You have to take advantage of that space, though. You have to realize the possibility and the potential of being in a room with people. So I think there is obviously a future, and people will go back to it. There's also a future for festival in digital form alongside that, as complementary, as a continuing drumbeat, and we're looking at that right now. But absolutely in person. And it comes down to, yes, the opportunity to gather with peers, the opportunity to share that experience with other people. And as I say, I think you can perhaps be a little cleverer when we do return in full to live in-person events, a little bit cleverer about what you, as I say, use that opportunity for. Events in person were quite transactional, quite two-way. You know, there was a session on stage and people watched it and then they moved on to the next one. Maybe there is something more that you can do while you have people's attention. And I think that needs to be explored as well.
Thanks. Thank you.
Yeah, it's dynamic, isn't it? As you say, I think we're still learning. It's 8:40, so we're nearly out of time, but time for one last question. From all your wealth of experience through your life's journey, and indeed not in the marketing world, as people are trying to figure out their careers, particularly people trying to get into the industry or at the beginning, what would your advice be, Russell, in terms of how people think about planning their career journeys?
Well, I suppose as I've illustrated perfectly, I think a plan might be a good idea, as opposed to just drifting from a rather nomadic career existence. So I think absolutely. I think if I'm thinking, well, twofold, and I think the advice would probably be the same. If you're thinking about a particular career or a career path, is throw yourself into it. As I said, I came to journalism late, and perhaps that helped me. But what it did do is focus my mind, and I did everything that I possibly could to understand what was required of me, to understand what I could offer people. And that just came, yes, from hard work, but also just learning its context as well. And I think that's for marketers as well. Understand what you can offer, and understand the industry that will help you in your path. So in the interest of time, I won't extend on that, but just have a plan, but also just kind of throw yourself into it, understand what you can offer, but also what it can offer you as well.
Awesome, Russell. Well, look, let me try and do a job of summarizing some of the key themes that I've heard this morning. And then I'll pass over to Mark for his closing remarks as well. First of all, absolute joy and pleasure to have you on, Russell. It really has been. Love hearing about your journey, and I've learned so much about you. In fact, more commonalities between us than I first ever envisaged. Besides the envy of that amazing beard that one day I aspire to have as well. So maybe get there. But look, beyond that, let me just kind of highlight a few key things. The first thing I think, which was, you talked about maybe have a plan, but I actually think maybe not, in many ways, because the way that what epitomizes your career is the ability to get to the heights of chief editor of the largest trade magazine, trade publication in marketing by not having a plan is actually pretty remarkable in itself. So there you go, right? Dairy manager to editor-in-chief, and done so in a very short space of time post that pivot moment. But what I find really interesting is the fact that you did decide to follow your path, although perhaps a little bit later on when you started on that journey. And I think that's credit to you, and it's actually inspiration to all of us who maybe are sitting in a role right now. We're kind of going, damn, I don't want to be here, and we can choose another way. And it's that inflection point that you had, which I think I would ask anybody else to have as well at that moment, if that's what's going through their mind, to really try and make that change. I also felt that's kind of interesting in a role like yours, where you do have to, really be kind of be seen with the who's who, and not be seen, but rather be kind of engaged with the who's who. And it's, you've been able to, you've had to sort of almost change your mindset to kind of get out of your comfort zone, to be comfortable while being able to do that. I love the phrase that you said, have a dollop of yourself that's left at home. And I thought that sort of confession around the whole concept around, whole self and how you kind of separate home and life was really insightful. And I actually think I totally agree with it as well. So we're on the same page as Seth Godin, which can't be a bad thing, right? Getting around to do things later on, as we mentioned, you talked about marketing having some great potential as an industry as well. And I think that is absolutely true. There's no better space to make a massive impact. So all those marketers who are potential people who want to get into the industry, please try and do so. And I think Russell, your final piece around throwing yourself in with both feet, if it's something that you really want to achieve and get into, is really great advice for anybody who's looking to come in and have a place within our space. So just once again, Russell, been an absolute pleasure. And I'll pass over to Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Russell. First off, you win the award for the best vocabulary. I had to look up misanthrope. And so for those who don't know what that is, and I didn't, Russell said he's not a misanthrope, which means he doesn't deliberately avoid humanity or something along those lines. You also, as I said, you do win the award for the best props. And it was interesting that it was your obsession with magazines that essentially led to the career you had. And I think there's a lovely thread there, even if it was a meandering one. But that is such a wonderful metaphor for nearly everybody we have on the show, that careers are squiggly things and don't follow a straight line path. I appreciate that you spoke openly about anxiety that I think we've all had, if we're being honest, through these last couple of years, and in general is an undercurrent for all of us. I think it's anxiety that is there as a driver. I don't know the brain chemicals side of it all, but it's a driver for many of us to push ourselves on. And so you showed lots of vulnerability. You mentioned confidence a few times. Confidence comes from doing well. And also confidence is what drives trust. Although in the case of some people, overconfidence, mentioning no names, might have the opposite impact, but we won't read between too many lines on that one. Honestly, Russell, it's been a pleasure. You're a genuinely nice person. I'm reminded of what Rich said about he's got a big bushy beard underneath, which is a person who cares deeply about the people in the industry. You talked about bringing your whole self. It's just been a lovely experience, and I'd like to thank you again for being so open, for being accepting of turning the tables a bit and you being in the spotlight, and for all the great support you've given for the School of Marketing. I think it's just been a thoroughly pleasant conversation with a really, really nice, genuinely humble and honest person. So thank you very much, Russell. And I hope everybody's enjoyed it. We're getting so Jessica, thank you, Russell. Love listening to your story. Claire Foster, I have the last issue of Smash Hits, Treasured Possession. Oh, there you go. You could have a side conversation. Yeah,
I'll get into touch with Claire. We can compare back copies of Smash Hits.
Yeah, no, it's been brilliant to have you on. And so have a great weekend, and thank you for your time, Russell. It's been much appreciated.
The pleasure is all mine. Thanks to everybody that watched, and you guys take care.
Brilliant, Russell. Well, we'll see everybody else same time, same place next week. Have a fantastic weekend, whatever the weather, and see you very soon.